here. So I went on Google and I put in startup co-founder, startup founder, and I saw these. A lot of jeans, a lot of dudes, a lot of 3s and 4s, and always this guy. But I'm here to talk to you about what it looks like in Australia. And we're seeing that actually your co-founders or your founders are usually in their 30s, average age is 36, 38. That 55% of them are the first-time founders. So you might be like, wow. But that also means that pretty much half of them are repeat offenders, which is great as well. 40% felt that they were hindered because of financial dependence. You know, you've got your mortgages, you've got a variety of factors, kids, those kind of things that might be a real strain on you financially. 33% wanted to do their startup because they were dissatisfied with their previous job. And 77% wanted to have ownership of the value that they were creating. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to run you through the 2016 Startup Muster report, looking at founders, looking at team, and also looking at the variety of the ecosystem that contributes to what we're being able to build today, and hopefully in the future. So just to quickly explain what Startup Muster is, it's the largest survey of the Australian startup ecosystem. The reason why we do it is to showcase the progress, challenges, and opportunities of what's happening in this community. We are independent, and we're incredibly transparent as to what we do and why we do it. All data is 100% kept in a de-identified state, so your information is never shared beyond what we collect, and the sole reason for why we collect it is to be able to produce these statistics. So the reason why I stress this is that a lot of people will put out surveys, but you need to understand the strategic intent behind why they're doing it, and if they're being transparent as to why they're doing it, because you're providing a lot of your information. And so we take that incredibly seriously. And we're supported by the Commonwealth Department of Industry, Innovation and Science and Google. So for 2016, we had an online survey that went in July and August of last year. We had over 118,000 questions answered by what we class as startup founders, soon-to-be founders, so future founders, and also the supporter community around them. And we asked over 100 questions. So we go long with questions and deep with responses to get really to that granular level. So when I talk about an ecosystem, we have the founder. That's great. But no startup is an island, and we have to also look at what is contributing around it. So I already mentioned the future founders. Those are the ones that are on the precipice of starting their startup. They got their idea and they're like, how do I jump? But then we've also got, oh, this is looking different. So then we've also got the supporter ecosystem, and that's co-working spaces, incubators, accelerators, investors, professional service providers, membership organizations, universities, private education. There's a variety of components and stakeholders in this community. And this is looking a little bit different. So anyway, yay, eureka moments. So what I'm going to talk about today is all of these components. So just quickly to round out the numbers, we had over 2,700 people take part. Then we go through a cleaning and validation process where it's quite intensive and it's quite exhausting. But the reason why we do it is to essentially create a statistical sample that's going to be reflective and is going to be of a quality standard. So we're not doing a census, we're not capturing every single startup, but the near 1,400 responses that we get, we're like, these are quality, we can actually get some insights from that. So let's first talk about the founder. Like I said, the age range that we're seeing most of our founders are between 30 and 40. Average age is like 36 to 38. So it's in that older age range. We're not all 17-year-olds drinking Red Bull, like wondering if we're going to go to uni or something like that. Guess which one's male and which one's female? It's pretty easy. Yeah, female is still on the lower end, but we're seeing each year it's increasing. And when you look at the future founder gender split, it's more like 70-30. So, that's indicating that that will continue to increase. Experience. So 55% have never started a startup before. 74% have never worked for a startup. But that tells me that we've got half of our startups are repeat offenders, so they enjoyed it, they want to do it again. And the other half are like true Aussies where they're like, I just want to give it a go. I got something to do, I just want to give it a go. So, that shows sustainability as well as some growth going on, new entrants. Life circumstances, and I think Michael spoke a bit about this as well, and I don't think this will be much of a surprise. So events that were critical, like I mentioned, dissatisfaction with previous job, we've all been there. We're probably all there to some extent. Not me, of course, I love what I do. Experience from founding a startup previously, so that's that, continual cycle. We're getting repeat offenders. Having a supportive partner or spouse. So these are where really individual components can influence what you want to do with your life. A fun project became a viable business, very understandable. And this one, circumstances made having my own business desirable. What kind of circumstances? We're talking about how this is a risky area to be and whatnot. Is this indicative of the fact that maybe our traditional employee offerings at the moment might not be reflective of how our society is actually running? So this brings up some really interesting questions. But essentially, what we're seeing is desire, experience, support, so the family, opportunity, and need. When we look then at what has stopped them, what literally has made them go, oh, don't know. We've got life circumstances. A lot of it's to do with funding or financial risk. Technical skills, nothing. That's probably the previous founders, always founders mentality. And, it's mostly financial. When we cut it down, it's risk, fear, and responsibility. And I put responsibility in quotation marks because a lot of the times we can hide behind that. We can be like, oh, we've got that, we can't do it. So it can limit us from, from further beliefs. So sometimes it is a lot of responsibility, but it can also be masking the other two. And then finally, what do you enjoy about running a startup? And what we found here is that what founders actually enjoy and what future founders think they're going to enjoy are very positively correlated. So the expectations are aligned, meaning good motivation as to why they're getting into it. Ownership of value created, developing technology, developing new skills, the opportunity for financial success, being my own boss. Not surprising whatsoever. It's all about ownership, experience, this is taking a while, sorry, development, and independence. So let's talk a bit about founding team members because, you can found a startup by yourself, but it's always nice to have a buddy. I've got a co-founder. We get along most of the time. And you'll find that, oh, sorry, that went by really quick. Yeah, 2 people seems like the sweet spot in Australia at the moment. What we're looking at with the skills is you've got your hipster hacker hustler covered in that sense within this component. You've got your strong tech, and you've got your strong business person, and the rest come with varying levels of experience. And what are they working on? So the big ones that are hitters at the moment are like fintech, education, social, marketing. You can get the actual graph, it's in the report, free to download, so you'll get to see all the different industries. But the ones where we're actually more down that end are the newer developers. So like you've got your augmented reality, virtual reality, insurance tech, cybersecurity, blockchain, where we don't have a lot going on down there, which we're seeing are really strong industries overseas. So it's kind of, we're doing well in the classics like fintech. People know about fintech, we talk about it quite a bit. But it will be interesting to see how these more emerging technologies come out over the years. or months, hopefully. So it's no surprise, startups like to outsource. 90% of startups in Australia outsource, and 90% outsource to the same contractors or to the same people. And 70% of that is within Australia. So this is showing sustainability. We're having a relationship with the business community that already exists within our borders. And also, when you look at what products are being created by startups, a lot of them are B2B. So there's an interdependence, there's a movement, there's a sustainability. And it's no surprise that they outsource 90% of the stuff when you look at how many employees, usually full-time, you've got. It's very much in that lower bracket, which isn't too surprising. These employees are similarly doing the same stuff that the co-founders are doing, so your hipster, hacker, hustler type business functions. So where are they working from? About 72% use a co-working space to some degree. And there's a variety of reasons. You can understand for such a small functioning team that taking on a rental arrangement or a lease can be time-consuming and costly, when really with co-working spaces you get everything from you get like-minded people that have probably had the same issue as you and know how to solve it, good events, mentorship, a variety of factors that make you feel like you're even more involved in this community. So that was no, and the other two were of varying degrees of yes, just because it's not showing up right there. So 92% of our startups have export revenue. This is a good thing. Startups are not just supposed to be staying in Australia, they're supposed to be thinking globally all the time from day one. So the fact that 92% of us are already getting it to some degree is really quite reassuring. In the report, you see a breakdown of how much of their revenue is actually coming from internal and external. And when we think about global, their plans in regards to global is to expand sales and to expand their business venues, or to capital raise overseas as well, to potentially take on like a program overseas, Austrade's doing a bunch of those things, and there's always, there's all the incubators and accelerators all over the world. And what was that last one? Open another office overseas. So they've got customers overseas, and they're also thinking, how can we engage more internationally? Okay, so funding. We all love talking about funding and money and how we all actually can pay for what we want to do. The first one was my own cash. The second one under that was venture capital, so private equity investment. And then as it goes down, which are not surprising, you've got, it's usually bootstrapped, family, friends, and fools. But as we went down here, it was actually interesting to see that the uptake of grants, government grants at all levels, so local, federal, state, was quite low. So they're not really seeing that right now as an opportunity. But when we go into the my own cash segment, so when we ask them if they've ever raised, how much they've raised, this is what we got to. So still a resounding, I've never tried to raise. So if we look into that one a little closer, we see that 49% of them plan to, but just not yet. And 28% it's not part of their plan. So that shows that there's been some strategic thought as to how they're going to be raising money and how they're going to be sustainable. And that one shows we're just not there yet. It's on the horizon, we have our plan, potentially they have to hit some other goals, but at least they're thinking about it in a way that is not just, okay, so I kind of started a startup, now I got to get money, I'll just get equity. There's some real thought going into it. There's a maturity about it as well. Yeah, and so just going back onto the government grant thing. So 33% said they had applied for a grant, 22% said they'd received one. And when we asked what were the reasonings, their relationship, their involvement with grants, the biggest response was the fact that they were time consuming. We know startups, one of the things they have an issue with is the fact they have no time. They've got to scale quickly. You don't want to be stuck, I guess, in that process of ambiguity, not knowing where you are, not knowing if you're going to get the money. You can focus in other areas. And that is a call to action. 72% feel that they need additional funding to be able to continue operating. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come from investment capital, but we need to fix that. That's, that needs some thought behind it as to how we're going to bring that number down. Because essentially, we should be building startups that are sustainable on their own at some point. And then, so what do startups need? This was no surprise that the top one is investment. It was investment, there was grants and so forth. It was a big one also was corporate customers. And that's an interesting thing to think about because we've seen an increase on the supporter side from large corporates looking to engage with startups. They come to co-working spaces, they come to incubators, they come to accelerators going, how do we connect? How do we connect with startups? Because they want to. So the opportunity with the corporate customer is quite high. And some people are recognizing that now, and potentially more will recognize that. One of the higher ones as well was promotion, awareness, media, like getting themselves out there in front of mainstream Australia so that people start understanding what we're doing here. Okay, so quick summary of founders, and then I'm going to quickly go into supporters, and then we can have chats. So a strong number of new founders. They're backing themselves, bootstrapping. They're running lean in terms of contracting and how they manage employment. They're looking to raise in the future, so that's got future direction. And they're already thinking globally. So some real good ticks there. Oh, and yeah, motivation is ownership and freedom. So let's talk about the supporters a bit. We've got what services they provide. Oh God, it's great. Mentorship was the highest one. Connection to startups was the next. Investment. Then it goes down into your regular co-working spaces and things like that. So the services that we know that these stakeholders would provide. But I mean, mentorship, it's such a big one. We live in a culture where people actually want to share, they want to give you your time, and they want to help you out. And we've even seen that today with that Ask an Expert thing and stuff like that. So startups assisted in the last 12 months. That one here is 0 to, that one is, I think, should be 0 to 10. In the report, we asked them how many applications they get per year. They get massive amounts of applications, yet the majority only take on 1 to 20 a year, or hopefully 1 to 20, while some take on 0. So there might be an imbalance here. A lot of people, a lot of startups are wanting assistance, but there isn't the capacity to meet that. So it's something to think about. I don't have the solutions, I'm just putting forward the data so that other people with much smarter brains than me can figure it out. So what we asked here was, how many startups have you helped in the last 12 months? So you've got like 0 to 20. Is there, yeah? So supporters in that was everything from investors, co-working spaces, incubators, accelerators. In the report, we actually go into more detail on investors, accelerators, and incubators, and co-working spaces, and you'll be able to see this for those individual stakeholders. So because you can understand that probably a university isn't able to respond to this question as accurately as, say, an investor. So we go into that specifics. And also, let's talk about what they need, because these are businesses as well, and these are businesses that are also building their business off of startups, so they might need some assistance as well. They were very much aligned with what we saw for the founders. They need connections, they need money, they need exposure, and yeah, it's very much aligned with what the founders need. And so I thought that was quite interesting. They're supposed to be helping the startups, yet they're needing the same type of help. Kind of funny. But also, Michael, you were talking about the fact that raising money for an incubator or an accelerator or something like that can be really, it's a process, just like for a founder raising. So specific interests. We had 33% of the supporter cohort were investors, and 19% were incubators and accelerators. We asked a question to see what industries and themes they specifically focused on. And so 56 of the investors focused on a specific industry, and 54 for the incubators. That says if you're not in their prism of what they care about, they don't want to hear from you. And so the last thing I'm going to show you is a graph showing what industries the founders are working in and what industries the investors have a specific interest in. Now, we are working with two separate data sets in this case, but the proportions are quite interesting. Investors are in blue, startups are in green. And so this brings me to think about, investment is incredibly needed by startups. Usually the investors are the ones to provide that. If there isn't an alignment of, or if there isn't at least a relationship between what the investors are interested in funding and what the startups are working on, that might be part of the issue. And so my last things to say is, we need to look at the alignment of what startups are doing and what supporters are offering, and we need to look at the quality, quantity, and offerings that are both benefiting startups and supporters, because they go hand in hand. This ecosystem is not built just for one or just for the other. You have to work together. Yeah. So yes, so Startup Muster 2016 report is out. It came out this morning. I am very tired. It's free to download at startupmuster.com. It's literally 24 pages of beautiful infographics. We just show the data, and we try to show it in a way that is actually fun to look at, because I've spent my life looking at data, and sometimes it can look pretty shocking. So yeah, and thank you for having me.
I just had a question about geography. Did you have some stats on different cities in Australia?
Yeah, so we do. There's actually a big map in the report that shows both the states and major cities for founders and for and for supporters. And we also show the percentage of startups and supporters that are not in a major city in each state. So it's like in early 40s for New South Wales, early, close to 20s in Victoria and in Queensland, and then it goes into the lower regions for SAWA. We have in our validation process flags, things that we correlate to, proxies that we use to make sure that we're getting or at least as accurate as possible fit, so that you wouldn't see that Victoria's only got 8% or something like that, then we'd have cause for concern. So yeah, I think it's on page, I want to say 11, but I don't know. It's on one of the pages.
Hey, I'm just wondering if there's anything you found particularly surprising about the findings.
So the reason that people put for why that they had to start a startup because they had no other option, that response option came because in 2015 we had, when we looked at it by gender, we had a lot of women who wrote as a response like none or unknown. And I went, we're missing something here. There must be a response option that we're just not missing. So we added a lot more options to that question, and then that one came out as a really strong identifier. So I haven't looked yet on the gender, whether it's much more stronger for female or male, but going by past precedent, I wouldn't be surprised. The other one was the fact that 70% of stuff is outsourced to Australia, because we need to, I guess, rephrase our thinking around outsourcing means bad, outsourcing means losing jobs. It's like, no, you're actually helping independent small to medium, large businesses because you're utilizing their services. So yeah, that was another big one.
Hi, thank you for the data and the awesome work. Do you model this off other surveys, or do you know of other surveys in other ecosystems that you can use to benchmark or gauge with?
That was a driving force why we did this, because even today I was chatting with a guy from Boulder and he looked at the report. He's the entrepreneur in residence for, I think, Startup Vic or Launch Vic.
Andrew
Anyway.
Hyde.
Yeah. So he's like, I wish we had this in the US. And it's like, no, because we looked and we couldn't find anything. And the point is that we couldn't find anything that we felt was also far enough away from potentially being biased or subjective or utilized in some kind of means that might discredit the data being collected. And so we designed the entire survey tool ourselves, And we had over 100 data items. It's a dynamic survey, so if you answer something, you might get more questions. Our completion rate was phenomenal because we do it all ourselves. We've got, my background from the ABS. We've got a couple of other guys on the team that were former ABS as well. So survey design, methodology, all that kind of stuff. It's like, that's what I'm comfortable talking about, less so than standing here and doing public speaking. But yeah, no, we haven't seen anything overseas or here that comes close. Well, who knows? I mean, I'm passionate about Australia at this point, and I think that Australia really needs this independent view of what's going on, because you can have a lot of hype, you can have a lot of media and all that kind of stuff, and that perception around success, meaning investors and raising funds, and the potential Holocaust outcomes in the US, that kind of stuff. We need to have a really strong footing here, and then we'll see what happens.
I'm just curious, how did you manage to decipher the different interpretations of the word startup? Because in Australia that can be a bit tricky.
Yeah, and that was an interesting one as well, because now that we had the 3 survey streams, we saw people answer as a startup, but really you looked at the business, you're like, sorry, you're a supporter? And we wish we could have you in the supporter stream, but you answered a bunch of different questions. So we have the definition that it's an early stage startup that has a large addressable market, that it's able to attain quickly utilizing technology. And we actually don't actively promote our definition because we want people to self-identify, and then we go through the steps of validation. So, I mean, it is a definition that's being used more and more because it combines a lot of the factors that we all have agreed upon relate to what a startup is. But yeah, it was interesting for this one because it was the first time that we did all 3 streams, and seeing, it was like, oh, come on, you should be in the supporter stream. You're great, but you're in the wrong stream. But yeah, so it's learnings for next year as well.